Let's see, it's not over here, and it's not over there either. Did the radar pick up another bird? Oh god, I hope not. I hate when that happens. Wait, what's that over there? Wait a minute, is that what I think it is? Oh my god, it is! I can't believe it. A Kodak camera, and it even works? I gotta get home and tell Hyder the good news. Hyder, I'm back from the beach. Now, Hyder, I know you think the satellite's a stupid idea, but I just found something that might change your mind. No, silly. Boats don't fall from the sky. I found a camera, duh. What do you mean, how is this a good thing? This is huge for us, little buddy. Now that we have this camera, I can broadcast outside of the island. We can finally get a hold of other people out there. And I can talk about all the things that I want to, and you don't have to listen to them anymore. I knew you'd come around. Alright, let's get this thing set up. Test 1, 2, test 1, 2. We're rolling? Then without further ado, let's get this show on the seas. Hello everybody, my name is Axel and this is AxelPort, one of the greatest islands the ocean has to offer. It's a pretty great place. Nice sunsets, nice beach, cool rocks, and things just randomly fall out of the sky into my yard. On this show we'll cover just about anything, assuming the heavens airdrop it to me, and because I'm so good at transitions, I know now is as good a time as any to say, let's talk about Super Mario RPG, Legend of the Seven Stars. Before getting too deep into the game itself, I want to take a moment to touch on the legacy this game has had over the years. Super Mario RPG is still definitely recognized by many who have played it as a great game and one of the best on the Super Nintendo. However, unlike other role-playing games on the system such as Chrono Trigger, Final Fantasy VI, or even Earthbound, Super Mario RPG seems to see less interest nowadays than its contemporaries. It still certainly sees love from time to time, but much of the discussion around Super Mario RPG has been whittled down to one point of conversation. It's not even really about the game anymore. If you're hearing about anything related to this game, it's most likely going to be why one particular character has never been put into Super Smash Bros. The peak of the game's popularity online was, from my view at least, easily during the late 2000s and early 2010s, back when content creation was getting increasingly popular and easier to share thanks to websites like YouTube and Newgrounds. Having released in March of 1996, the game was getting to the point in 2008 where those who grew up playing it were able to go to those types of places to share their own works related to it or talk about why they loved it so much. The emulation scene at the time also tended to lean heavily into the Super Nintendo library, due to them being mostly pretty easy to run and the system's library being filled with classic and iconic franchise cornerstones. Couple that with an easily identifiable figure like Mario, and a JRP legend at their peak in Square being the developers of the game, and it's now hard to see why those factors led to the game seeing a widespread popularity in the West that the game hadn't experienced since its release, being one of, if not the best-selling RPG on the system in North America with 660,000 units. Yeah, only 660,000. You can probably tell RPGs didn't sell well in the West when at their best less than 3% of all North American Super Nintendo owners even owned a copy of the one that sold the most units. I can actually speak from personal experience on some of this at least, having experienced that surge of popularity when I was younger. I spent hours as a kid scrolling through game FAQs forums reading comments that, may not have aged particularly well. Oh god, we really said stuff like this. I'd watch Let's Plays to see more of the game in action, and as a result of all the hype around it, I ended up buying it eventually on the Wii Virtual Console around 2011. That was also the last time I fully played through the game before this video, however. All this time later, I remember the game fondly, but I'm incredibly curious to see what's caused this game to be somewhat left behind, and if it's in fact still worth playing through to this day. Being a little kid, I probably accepted a lot more problems in games than I should have, but I'm willing to bet that's not going to be an issue with this one. Why don't we start with the story? Our story kicks off with Princess Peach, or Toadstool as she's still referred to as in this game, being kidnapped by Bowser. Well, I should have seen this coming. Thankfully, Mario immediately springs off into action, since it just so happens that Peach was just sitting in his front lawn. In no time at all, Mario is face to face with Bowser in his keep, knocking the chandelier he was standing on into the floor below. It's not a particularly joyous celebration of victory, however, as a gigantic sword abruptly pierces the castle, sending Mario, Bowser, and Peach all flying off to different parts of the world. After arriving home, Mario quickly makes his way back to the keep, only to discover that the gigantic sword is both alive and not accepting visitors. This is Exor, a member of the Smithy Gang, a group of machine creatures hell-bent on taking over Mario's world and destroying the Star Road, the means by which wishes are granted to those who request them. When Exor pierced through the sky, he successfully broke off 7 star pieces from the Star Road, scattering them across the world. Although not fully aware of this until he's acquired a couple of star pieces, Mario ends up tasked with finding and saving the princess, collecting the star pieces before they can be destroyed by the gang, and eventually ending their invasion once and for all. Now, this overarching plot synopsis probably sounds pretty basic, and that's because quite frankly it is. While there are certainly many more story beats that I've glossed over, a lot of them are only related to the main quest insofar as you're just trying to find the whereabouts of the next star piece, which are pretty often just lying around, which does make sense. They were scattered by Exor, not strategically hidden, but it still creates some weird situations. The first 2 pieces are protected at some capacity by Smithy's gang, however following that, up until the very last star piece, which is protected by Smithy himself, if the pieces are being guarded, it's by creatures from Mario's world who just don't realize what kind of things these even are. Hell, the 4th star piece doesn't even have a boss fight of any kind to protect it. You just walk through 3 screens of Star Hill, this place where wishes fall from the sky, and then oops, there it is. Star piece acquired. This place is barely mentioned before you go there, and then it's quickly forgotten in lieu of the sunken ship immediately afterwards, leaving me to question why they didn't just have it be baked into the monster cake and marry more, considering how much of a monstrosity that thing already was, and how much more important that sequence is anyway. With how unimportant the main quest can be at times, this adds another problem to the plot with the Smithy Gang. There's really nothing interesting about most of these guys, and they spend long stretches of the plot just completely missing. After you kill Bowyer and retrieve the 2nd star piece, the Smithy Gang doesn't really show up again until the 5th piece is acquired, as the people of Seaside Town are revealed to be held hostage by Eurytovich, who is then quickly disposed of after trying to steal the piece from you. Then they again completely disappear until after you acquire the 6th piece, which doesn't sound as long, but trust me, it is. And at that point, the gang's Power Ranger knockoffs, the Axel Rangers, swoop in and try and steal it. However, you once again just immediately kill them, and then it's time to go off to Bowser's Keep to end the fight once and for all. These guys are never really a threat, just disappearing for hours at a time in this story, and Super Mario RPG is already on the shorter side by most RPG standards. My playthrough clocked in at around 16-ish hours, and until the final areas of the game, the Smithy Gang are around and causing trouble for maybe an hour, less than that even? If it weren't for boss fights like Bowyer's and the Axel Rangers, Bowyer's for having neat mechanics and the Rangers for the cool factor, I'd struggle to find much of anything positive to say about them. However, in spite of the main plot being pretty weak at times, the characters and subplots are so fantastic it makes up for all of it. The main party of this game has some of the best characterization the Mario franchise has ever had, and if you want a good example of that, look no further than the titular character. Mario is as silent of a protagonist as ever. However, to circumvent this limitation, they make Mario into something that hadn't been attempted in this sort of way before: comedic. Making Mario just pretend to say something to the Chancellor to move the plot along early in the game would have worked, but instead he and Mallow acting out the sequence of events that led up to that moment, and the Chancellor being a buffoon is much more enjoyable as the player. There are a lot of these simple comedic moments throughout the game, one of my favorites being when Mallow meets his parents for the first time, because Mario at this point already knows that Mallow sobbing causes it to rain, so he pulls out an umbrella in anticipation. All of these moments help to make Mario feel much more active than he would otherwise, because he's the only one among the main cast who doesn't talk. And on the topic of characters who do actually speak, Mallow is by far the most underappreciated character in the entire Mario franchise, bar none. I truly do not understand why Mallow was ignored so heavily in favor of Gino as far as newcomers from this game go. When you first meet Mallow, he's a crybaby puffball who thinks he's a frog, which, as anyone with eyes may notice, no, he's not. However, over the course of the game, as he spends more and more time around Mario and the rest of the party, he becomes stronger and more courageous, eventually leading the charge against Valentina to save his parents when he learns of his origins as Prince of Nimbusland. His arc is easily the best in the game, partially because he's one of the only 2 in the party to even have an arc of some kind, but it's still great to see character growth from someone in the party. And then there's Bowser. Oh my goodness. This is the best characterization Bowser's ever had. He is constantly putting on a tough guy persona in front of his arch rival. However, due to the fact that he's lost his his castle, his minions, and is forced to partner with Mario to even get anywhere in the first place, the writers play up Bowser's vulnerable side in the best way possible. One of my favorite exchanges in the entire game is when Mallow yells at him not to bash open the door his parents are locked behind during the Nimbus Land section, something Bowser's done a lot throughout the game to get things accomplished. It's partially because it shows how Mallow is grown enough to yell at Bowser of all people, but it's also because Bowser starts sobbing because he wants to feel useful, or when you make it to Monster Town, and Bowser sees some of his former minions have carved out new lives for themselves. Instead of being an evil tyrant and forcing them to return to his army, he just wishes them luck. This characterization carries on into other Mario games from time to time, which is great, because caring Father Bowser is the best version of Bowser. As for Peach and Gino, they're alright, but not as good as the other three. Peach is the last member you acquire of the party, so she gets less time to shine, but once she is in the mix, she's clearly the most adventurous of the group, and is probably the one who shows the most interest in ending the gang's invasion, besides Gino, of course. Peach actually has a lot of great qualities throughout the game, but that's more gameplay related than story, so we'll touch on that later. And then there's Gino. Gino is actually a little star spirit possessing an action figure owned by a boy in Rose Town, and besides telling the rest of the cast about the Star Road and the importance of the spirits, does really nothing of note. At the end of the game, they make note that once the last star spirit is acquired, he'll be returning to the Star Road because his work is done, but I don't really feel sad about that or anything because it's just not very interesting. Not to mention, it's not like he's dead, he just fulfilled his obligation to the Star Road. Fantastic design though, that goes for both him and Mallow, plus the majority of the other new NPCs. The subplots that occur while you're hunting down the star pieces are pretty great. A lot of them have some pretty fun characters, such as Jonathan the Pirate Shark or Valentina and Dodo. Valentina and Dodo especially. These two try to usurp Nimbus Land by pretending this fat bird is one of the Cloud people, and the townspeople just kinda accept it. There are a lot of great moments in these subplots, but if I were to single out one sequence to call my absolute favorite in this game, there's really no contest. Booster and his Sniffets are my favorite group of villains in this game, and I'm using massive air quotes on that because I don't think Booster has the intelligence necessary to be evil. This guy managed to get his hands on Princess Peach when she fell from the sky after Exor pierced Bowser's Keep, and then managed to convince himself that this means they should get married just because he landed on his balcony. The dude is a total moron and pretty frequently has no clue what's going on with anything around his keep, letting Mario in on everything he's planning because he thinks to some extent that Mario's just there to play games, but also trying to stop him from ruining his wedding because he also sometimes realizes that he's there to try to save Peach. Meanwhile, there are Sniffet minions who essentially do everything for Booster, but they too are not particularly bright, as evidence when one has you help him open a locked door at the wedding chapel in order to tell Booster that you're there to stop him. The Sniffets try their best to help him, and he means well. He wants Peach to be a happy wife, but the man's naivety leads him to getting left at the altar, unfortunately. Sorry, Booster, maybe another girl will fall from the sky who will love you. But, with all the side stories finished and with 6 of the 7 star pieces in hand, the fight gets taken to the Smithy gang. With help from Mallow's parents, the gang breaks into Bowser's Keep to hopefully find the last star piece and banish the gang from this realm. A quick romp through some pretty simple challenges and one murdered sword later, the party falls into the Smithy gang's world. This final dungeon is pretty underwhelming, much like the rest of the Smithy stuff, though. A couple bland set pieces involving screws and conveyor belts, and a few mini-boss fights against Smithy gang members you already defeated. I guess there's clones now. The highlight of this entire area is probably the random boss fight against 2 characters that were never established and then for some reason also have a giant snake. Completely out of left field, but it's a fun fight, so that's what matters in the end. After making their way through the void, the group reaches Smithy's factory, and upon realizing that the only way to stop the invasion is by defeating Smithy himself, dive down to defeat him and retrieve the final star piece from his core. I've been pretty critical about the Smithy gang up to this point, but this final battle is pretty damn good. In the first phase, he uses his smelter to construct additional minions to aid in fighting you, as well as using some of the strongest attacks in the game. It's not too challenging, but still requires more thinking than just spamming Smithy with attacks non-stop. Once he's taken too much damage, Smithy gets angry and destroys the factory around you, plummeting you into the basement in the second phase. What the hell? Okay, well, that's something. Definitely way scarier than anything in this game should be. Anyways, this second phase is one of the most fun fights in the entire game to me, as Smithy reveals his true form. His sledgehammer attack packs a punch, and his head can swap between 4 different phases, each having different attacks and stats. For example, the tank has high physical attack and defense, but the wizard head boosts Smithy's magic at the cost of having terrible defenses. It's not the most challenging fight, but I certainly felt that it required a degree more strategy than most of the other fights in the game. A few shell kicks, laser beams, and wax to a frying pan later, Smithy's defeated, the gang is destroyed, and the last star piece is finally collected. After one final acknowledgement of thanks, Gino departs with the star pieces, taking them back to Star Road and returning the world back to normal. The credits feature some nice moments, Mal getting to finally be among his people as their prince, Bowser getting his castle back in proper shape, and hey, Booster found true love after all. Guess someone really did fall into his lap. The credit roll proper also has one of 2 appearances of Luigi in the entire game, the other being a reference to him in A Wish on Star Hill. It's strange how I didn't really notice it before, but he just doesn't appear anywhere in this world. At least he gets to lead a celebratory parade, which also features the Smithy Gang? Not too sure how that one adds up since we definitely killed them all, but hey, it's not like we ever hear from them again, so I guess they can party too, why not? The final shot of the castle is so beautiful, and the rendition of the iconic 1-1 theme is an incredibly comforting song to close out the game and say goodbye to Super Mario RPG. All in all, the storyline of Super Mario RPG is pretty fun. Most of the Smithy stuff falls flat for me, but a lot of the smaller moments, like the comedy and the characters, make up for it. Despite being a role-playing game, Super Mario RPG isn't really a game to experience for its plot anyway. No, the reasons to play this game are the gameplay and the world. Super Mario RPG is a classic turn-based JRPG. Turn-based battles, good guys on one side, bad guys on the other, the basic stuff. However, unlike a lot of the games Squaresoft was developing at the time, such as the Final Fantasy and Mana series, which use 2D sprites and 2D environments, this one uses an isometric view and pre-rendered sprites similar to Donkey Kong Country. The visual style of this game really stands out among the other role-playing games on the system and creates some really charming environments. Places like Bean Valley and Booster Tower look fantastic, and in the case of Booster Tower, take advantage of the isometric angle to make the environment more interesting. This view is also used for both platforming and puzzle elements, such as platforms that swirl around each other and so you have to line up your jumps properly to progress or receive an item. The sunken ship segment of the game puts the camera angle to the test with things like the 3D maze, which is well, it's certainly not good, but it was pretty experimental and it's the only time the game uses the isometric view to obscure your vision purposefully during the journey, so it's not a big deal. The use of the isometric perspective to make the core element of Mario games, platforming, come into play while also creating even more opportunities to flesh out interesting concepts is nailed to near perfection. Near. Battles also take on this isometric style, and this, oh baby, this is a good combat system. As I said before, combat is turn-based, with fights consisting of 3 of your party members versus a gaggle of enemies. However, unlike other role-playing games of the same time period, which have often been criticized for having this just keep tapping the A button and you'll win mentality, Super Mario RPG absolutely obliterates this idea with one simple solution: timed hits. After almost every attack, whether you use your basic weapon attack or one of your specials, essentially the spells for each character, you'll have an opportunity to press a button to inflict more damage or gain further benefits at some point during the animation, such as Gino boost going from simply an attack boost to also carrying a defensive boost as well. This makes every single move require attentiveness on behalf of the player. Sure, you probably can beat the entire game without ever getting a single timed hit, but your attacks are significantly weaker, oftentimes doing less than half of what they would have been if you had successfully performed the hit in the first place. This also applies to when enemies attack you, as if you hit the A button just before you take damage, you'll either take much less damage for a move, or just take minimal damage altogether. This means even during enemy attacks, it's important to stay focused on the fight, or else see your resources drained very quickly. Different weapon varieties also have different timings to activate the timed hit, and each character has multiple different types of weapons. For example, Mario's glove weapon type and shell weapon type have very different but clearly defined timings to deal the most damage, as do Mallow's symbols and his staffs. Timed hits provide just the right amount of challenge and interactivity to fights to make every encounter engaging and make the encounters feel fast-paced. The party of playable characters in this game is actually relatively small, featuring only 5 characters, but each one fulfills a different useful niche. Peach is the white mage, providing the party with powerful healing spells. Mal's a black mage, shocking and freezing foes into submission. Gino is the glass cannon of the party, taking a lot of damage from enemies even if you properly defend, but in return dishing out some of the highest damage rolls of any character, with by far the best specials in the entire game. Bowser's the classic tank, high health, high defense, and crazy attack, but his magic skills are generally unremarkable. And then there's Mario, who fills the role of well, I guess that's kinda hard to say, really. He has good stats all around and also boasts some powerful magic. Maybe Red Mage is the most accurate descriptor? But the red stands for fire? He's Mario. His role is Mario. Each character is a lot of fun in battle and provides a lot of strategy in determining what's best for a current situation. I'm about to face a boss. Do I want Mallow and Peach on hand for a backup healer in case Peach goes down? Or do I swap in one of Bowser and Gino for some extra firepower and just hope Peach doesn't get hit by anything too powerful while I blitz the fight? It can be a lot of fun messing around with party composition. For a time, anyway. Because eventually, and by that I mean around the sunken ship, it becomes pretty clear that the best party build is Mario, Gino, and Peach. Mario always has to be in the party, so no matter what, he's gonna be your jack of all trades, besides healing of course, and wouldn't you know it, Peach has absurdly cheap, amazing healing spells, including a full team heal that only costs 4 flower points, essentially this game's NP for spells. Which, for reference, by the time Peach even joins the party, 4 flower points is basically nothing. After that, there's only 1 slot left, and between Gino boost and his other specials, or just his absurdly strong regular attacks, Gino easily trumps the other 2 benchwarmers to be a constant screen nuke at the cost of flower points that you're likely not using with Mario and Peach barely uses. Bowser can be occasionally useful due to having high defense, and as such during instances where Gino is basically getting 2-shot by enemies, it can be convenient to have him in, but Mallow, oh poor Mallow. Once Peach joins the group, he just drops off the face of the earth. You don't need him for healing anymore because Peach is just better, and Gino is starting to get multi-target moves around the same time, so Mallow also loses that niche since for some reason this game is really stingy with multi-hit moves. Following Marymore, Mallow sat on the bench and only showed up in cutscenes, and when he leveled up it was as if to remind me, hey Axel, I still exist, if you need me just ask. And I'm sorry Mallow, but that time never comes. Bowser and Mallow aren't even bad per se, they're just so outclassed by Gino and Peach that it's hard to convince myself to use them. The game isn't super difficult regardless of party makeup, although that's not to say there was no challenge. I've certainly had some game overs in my playthrough, and there were quite a few bosses that had me sweating, such as the fights against Valentina and Punchinello. A lot of the bosses actually have really cool concepts that take advantage of the way combat's designed to make interesting fights. One of my favorite examples is early on against Bowyer, where he'll occasionally shoot an arrow into a button on the field, which will disable that menu during your combat phase, preventing you from using items, specials, or even your basic attacks. It can certainly heighten the tension of the fight if your items are disabled and one of your party members goes down and then they can't even be revived at the moment. Following the events in Nimbus Land, which is actually a pretty tough area, the game completely nosedives in difficulty, at least in my playthrough. And that's because as soon as the day is saved, you have access to the most busted items in the entire game, the lazy shells. The weapon version of this shell is Mario's ultimate weapon, boosting Mario's attack by an additional 30 points over the best weapon he could have prior to getting the thing, which in this game is a lot. Attacks that were doing low triple or high double digits? Yeah, try 200 at minimum, it's that strong, and it doesn't even need the timed hit to do insane damage. And then, there's the armor. There was a lot of debate back in the day about if the lazy shell armor is actually any good, and to that I say, yes, it absolutely is. When you put this armor on a character, they immediately become unkillable. Almost nothing in the entire game will do more than 1 damage to the character wearing it at the cost of neutering your attack and magic attack stats. However, on a character like Peach, this essentially doesn't matter because her primary purpose is healing anyway. And while it does lower the efficacy of her spells, she's also now unkillable, so she has all the time in the world to heal up the party anyway. These 2 stupid shells expedite an already broken party to new heights, as now that Peach is unkillable and Mario is overpowered to hell, Gino can focus on spamming specials while Mario finishes off anything that survives, and Peach can either heal the party back to full, or use some sort of attacking item to provide additional support. This strategy applies to every fight for the rest of the game, and without fail mow through everything left. Even the final boss is made into a joke because of just how good this setup is. The only fight that really poses any threat after you acquire these items is the game's secret super boss, Culex, a creature that's meant to have traveled to Mario's world from Final Fantasy IV, seemingly. Bringing with him the 4 crystals of the element and a barrage of powerful spells, it's a great fight and easily the toughest in the entire game, even if the Peach shells makes it much easier to just tank through. I certainly would have been remiss if I didn't mention him, but truthfully with the shells, it wasn't that much more difficult than anything else. In all, the combat is super fun. It's well paced, timed hits provide a great layer of attentiveness to combat, and for most of the game there's a good amount of strategy needed to win most fights. Those 2 shells completely annihilate the last couple hours of the game, but truthfully you don't have to use them, there's a reason they're tucked away in secret. What else is there to talk about? Oh, the actual world. I've touched on it a few times throughout the review, but the world of Super Mario RPG is wonderful, feeling incredibly lively in just about every area you visit. Tadpole Pond, Nimbus Land, hell, this is the very first iteration of a Mushroom Kingdom town that we see in any Mario game. So many places in this game are vibrant, interesting locations due to some combination of memorable characters, memorable set pieces, or memorable music. Tadpole Pond has the wise sage frog Fuchsius, Mallow's grandfather, and a helpful where do I go next option in case you're a little lost. And the tadpoles themselves are also pretty great, providing the party with some great healing items. The Mushroom Kingdom has a lot of great, completely pointless characters, like this kid who wants to jump as high as Mario, and when Mushroom Town gets invaded by the Smithy Gang early on, while everyone else is fearing for their lives, he's just bouncing away with his new pogo friend. My absolute favorite is the angry little kid who's playing some sort of handheld, because early on you can make him furious with you by repeatedly talking to him, messing up its perfect run. And then later on, if you speak to him again, you can buy the game off him and actually play it in the pause menu. It's not super crazy, you're just a beetle shooting stars at shells falling from the sky endlessly. But the fact there's this completely optional minigame hidden behind a character that you might have only come back to bother for your own amusement is really cool. The only areas that really don't do it for me, besides the short interlude paths that are more just to have some sort of progression between towns like Roseway and Booster's Path, are Star Hill and Barrel Volcano. Star Hill is a dungeon that has absolutely nothing going on. You can literally walk in, grab the star piece inside of it, and leave without interacting with almost anything, save for a few glowing flowers to open gates to progress. It's certainly much weaker than any other star-related places that Mario explores down the road. Barrel Volcano isn't as bad. You do at least have some interesting things in here, such as Hinopio, a random toad who decided to set up a base of operations inside a volcano like any smart businessman would, and Czar Dragon, an actual boss fight to protect a star piece. Already doing better than Star Hill, but it kind of feels like the game wanted to wrap up collecting the star pieces already and have you go fight the smithies, because for the second to last dungeon it feels really dang short compared to anything that preceded it. There's not even a puzzle element to this dungeon, just walk through and kill the roadblock. These are the only two places that really aren't great in the entire game, and even that's not because they're truly bad, just largely unremarkable. Otherwise, the world of Super Mario RPG is absolutely wonderful to explore and discover all of the secrets hiding in it. And even just chatting with the random townsfolk can be a delight. The last thing I want to touch on is the soundtrack. I've spent a great deal of time listening to the music of this game while I wrote the script and during editing, and let me tell you, I love this soundtrack. Whether it's restyling a classic Mario song or a completely new track, there isn't a song in here I would say is bad. The normal battle theme is upbeat and full of character. It's also incredibly catchy, which is good since you hear it so often. The song that plays on the main menu screen is so comfortable and inviting to the point where I'll sometimes just throw it on while I'm working on artwork or before I go to bed in order to unwind. It's an absolute delight. The Forest Maze track is probably one of the most iconic tracks from this game, in large part thanks to that whole online content creation phase I mentioned earlier. But it's also just a great song in its own right, very bouncy and mysterious, just like it should be. My two absolute favorite tracks, though, are Nimbus Land and Booster Tower. It fits Booster so well. It's gritty while maintaining a sense of lightheartedness, really encapsulating the character and area it's in perfectly. And as for Nimbus Land, well, I didn't even realize that this track was from this game, but it is absolutely gorgeous and easily my absolute favorite. And with that, I think I've said my piece. This game has certainly held up excellently. I think I actually appreciate this game more on a revisit than I did after that first playthrough all those years ago. While it's not perfect, the villains are kinda bland, the main quest gets kinda rushed along, those aren't why the game is still beloved by so many, and why they want a character like Gino to be remembered. It's the world, the gameplay, the music, and the colorful cast that leaves Super Mario RPG Legend of the Seven Stars as a Super Nintendo classic. I said before that the game is being talked about less nowadays, and truthfully, I think I realized the reason this game is being sort of forgotten. It has nothing to do with the quality. It's still great, easily one of the best role-playing games on the system. The reason that discourse of the game is drying up is because of its availability, likely as a result of having been made as a partnership between Nintendo and Squaresoft, now Square Enix. The game sees no re-releases. The classic Final Fantasies, Chrono Trigger, Square has remade or ported those titles several times throughout their history on various consoles, mobile devices, and even on PC through Steam. Obviously, these aren't exactly comparable, seeing as Square owns these titles in full, while only owning certain properties relating to Super Mario RPG. But for whatever reasons, Nintendo and Square Enix struggle to reach agreements when it comes to bringing this game to newer platforms. To put it into perspective, the two most recent re-releases of this game are on the Wii U and Super Nintendo Classic Edition, one of which is a system that barely sold any units, and the other was purposefully limited in production. It didn't even see a new 3DS release, which even Earthbound received, and that entire game series gets even less attention from Nintendo when it comes to re-releases. As of right now, those are the only ways to purchase this game unless you want to shell out these prices for a Super Nintendo copy, which, no, you don't. I would recommend the Wii Virtual Console release, but since the Wii Shop channel is defunct, that's out the window. It's not available on the Switch's online SNES library either, and considering we got Spanky's Quest before Super Mario RPG, I kinda have my doubts it's coming anytime soon. I'm not gonna pretend that emulation doesn't exist, of course, but man, it's not hard to see why the game's being forgotten. There's no frickin' way to play it. Well, what can you do, I guess? If you can find a way to play it, I highly recommend it. It's pretty short by RPG standards, so it's not a big time investment, and it's super easy to pick up and put down. And hey, with a game this good, you'll definitely want to play its sequel as soon as possible. Right, Hyder? What do you mean there's not a second? Yep. This was the only Mario RPG of this style. After that, Square and Nintendo's Mario collaborations were all about hoops and monopolies. They took one stab at making Mario into Final Fantasy and said, yep, I'm satisfied. There were plans for a second game, and hell, even to this day, there are people who want to see a follow-up, but the rumors and prototype never came to fruition back in the 90s, and that was that. It's too bad, too. If only there was some other Mario RPG series that could have refined some of the concepts present in this game, given us more interesting worlds and characters to explore. Expand on the time hit system in new and unique ways, all with another interesting aesthetic. Ah, that would have been great. Imagine if there were two series that did that. It's a shame that never happened. Oh geez, something else washed ashore today? Talk about an exciting time, I wonder what that is. Catch you next time, everybody. Oh, this is gonna be great. Hello, late night post-editing Axel here to thank you for watching this video. I kind of forgot that I need to record an outro for this, but we're here. We're gonna do it now. This has been a complete roller coaster for me. At points I didn't think I was gonna get this video out, but it's here and we're finally done with it. And I'm so happy to finally be able to have accomplished this. Usually there'd be something else to click, but this is the first thing, so you only get this one for now. But if you want to see more in the future, you can subscribe. I think the bell, all that good stuff. But for now, thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.